Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be discussing the NDB approach. We are going to be talking through the general non-precision approach profile that you could use, and then we're going to be talking about the NDB approach maintenance. This is for entertainment purposes only, and this is only for flight simulator use, not in real life. The NDB approach is can be done from either a vectored or it can be done via a procedure turn. Um, you can watch my other video that will be coming out soon on the procedure turns, which will go through everyone and how to do them. So the non-precision approach then profile is the same as how we would get to it for a ILS or any others. So we would either be vectored or do the procedure turn onto the final approach track. So this is a final approach track rather than the localizer. Once we're established on the final approach track, we will have a descent point. Now this will usually be a DME distance, or sometimes it will be a waypoint. For NDB, it will usually be a either a radar derived distance or a DME readout. So 0.5 before that descent point in still wind conditions. If we have a headwind, it might want to be about 0.3, but 0.5 before, we want to reduce the power to our descent speed. This will slow the aircraft back to our approach speed. At 0.1 nautical miles before the descent point, we want to select flaps to our approach. So this is usually about one notch of flaps in most aircraft, but it depends on the aircraft you're flying. And then we want to set our rate of descent based on our ground speed. So we do ground speed times by 5, which will give us our rate of descent. So if we're flying at 100 knots ground speed, we're going to need to descend at 500 feet per minute to maintain a 3-degree glide. Along the approach, we need to check our altitude versus the chart readout. So as this approach does not have a 3D guidance method, we're going to need to maintain the descent rate and check our altitude at every single mile against our true altitude in order to gain whether we're too high, too low, or on profile. And then at 1,000 feet, this is the approach band gate if required. So if the RVR is already above limitations, don't worry about this step. However, if the RVR is below our limits, then we need to check our RVR from the tower check it's still within limits, and then we can continue the approach. If it's not within limits, we must go around. We're then going to so continuing down the approach. Then we want to check the altitude versus the chart readout, and then we're at 100 to go before our minimums. It is going to be a minimum descent altitude, so we can't go below it. We're going to call out 100 to go. And then we're going to start looking up for the runway. And then at minimums, we're going to call minimums. If we are not visual with the runway, then we're going to say no contact going around. We're going to go full power and initiate a go around. Once we've got a positive rate, we're going to raise our flaps and then advise ATC and follow the missed approach. If we are visual with the runway, we're going to say visual, continue. We're going to complete our landing flow by putting our flaps down, and we're going to go runway clear, gear is down, flap set, approach stable. So the NDB approach maintenance. So we want to maintain a high scan rate along with all our IFR approaches. As I said earlier, there's no glide slope indication. It's just an NDB needle, which is the blue needle you can see on the PFD by the course indicator. So we want to keep our fast eyes, slow hands, and very small corrections. We're flying the attitude and the rate of descent. Okay, we're not referencing anything else with regards to the altitude, and we're just referencing the altitude to the chart, okay? Because that's the only thing we can do on an approach like this. That's why it's a 2D approach. We need to make corrections as required to maintain the track and profile. So as we approach the distance, so you can see on the chart on the right there, at each DME readout, it gives us an altitude we need to be at. So when it comes to 4 miles, when we're approaching 4 miles, so about half a mile before, we want to have our readout ready. So 4 miles, 1,580 feet. And then when we get to 4 miles, we need to be at 1,580 feet. If we're not at that altitude, we need to make a small attitude adjustment to get back on profile. But there's no need to get back on profile by the next advisory altitude. Don't be chasing the numbers. Small adjustments down to our minimums. And again, same with the blue needle. As it's an NDB approach, we've got obviously dip. So as we turn, the needle will point approximately 10 degrees to the direction we're turning. So just be aware of that when we're making our corrections. Before making any corrections, make sure we're wings level before making any corrections. And again, same as with an ILS approach, very small changes on the heading, about 5 degrees maximum. And then once we're just going to continue that instrument scan, and once we're back on the final approach track and altitude, we're just going to adjust the attitude to maintain that and bug for heading. So looking on the chart then, we have the NDB Approach runway 19 here at Oxford. So this is going to be the one from the example video. So as we can see at the top, 16-2, Cat A, B and C for the NDB Approach runway 19. We've got all our frequencies at the top here, and we've got the briefing strip here. So we've got the locator, which is the Oscar X-ray 367.5. So we will need to tune the Oscar X-ray. And the final approach course, which is 191. So we can use the course indicator on the CDI as a bit of situational awareness. Obviously, the CDI won't move, so we're going to need to have the NDB tuned. Platform altitude is 1,800 feet, and starting our descent at 4.7 to DME to the India Oscar X-ray Foxtrot. The decision altitude / MDA is 750, so we can't go below this altitude. So you'll notice when we get in the aircraft, the minimums is actually going to be 800 feet, because we give ourselves that 50 feet buffer to initiate that go around. Airport elevation 263, and then the missed approach is as published, and you can see that there, 165 to the 4 DME, left turn to the Oscar X-ray. So we can either do this via radar vectored, or as the procedure as we've seen here, or we can do a direct arrival. Most of the time it will either be radar vectored or it'll be via the procedure. We've got our chart readouts here, so 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles. So we need to make sure we've got these to check our altitude as we go down the approach. We then have our diagram here, so we'll be 3,500 feet over the locator, and then we begin our descent to 1,800 feet once we leave the hold down to 1,800 feet. And then at 6.5 we turn to intercept the final approach track, and then at 4.7 we start our descent to maintain the 3-degree glide path. Here are the IVR requirements, so make sure we're above those before we approach. But that is the approach chart, so hopefully that makes sense, and now we're going to go into the aircraft and show you how to do a NDB approach. And hello everyone, welcome back to the air. We're currently inbound the Oscar X-ray holding fix, ready for the NDB approach runway 19 at Oxford. So you can follow along on your chart. We're now 1 mile away from the outbound, so we're going to set the outbound course of 358 for a Cat A aircraft. And then shortly we're going to see the needle drop, and then we're going to wait for the needle to fully drop. So we're on the outbound segment of the NDB approach. And the needle's starting to drop now. We maintain our heading and we're past the beacon as the needle has gone past 90 degrees. So we're twisting, turning, starting our timer, and we're going to report beacon outbound to air traffic control. So we need to descend down to 1,800 feet now, so we're bugging 1,800, checking QNHs 1002, 1002, T's and P's in the green, and reducing power to start to descend. So again, we're going to pull the tail of the NDB to maintain a track of 358. So we're not just maintaining a heading of 358, we're maintaining the track of 358 by pulling the tail around. So as you can see, the tail's mostly round now, so we're just readjusting our heading for the wind. So we're approaching 1 mile from the turn now, so 5.5, 1 mile before the turn, we're going to bug the final approach track. Now, even though the localizer, the course deviation indicator does not have any effect on the approach and we're not required to use it, we use it for situational awareness, and it allows us to keep the NDB needle lined up on the CDI. We're also bugging our command heading, so we're going to bug 40 degrees to the right so we can intercept our final approach track. So we're at 6.5 now, so we're going to make our right hand turn, as per the chart, to intercept the final approach track for the NDB approach, maintaining 1,800 feet. So the heading is got 5 degrees to go, so we're going to make our right hand turn to establish ourselves on the final approach track. So the NDB needle needs to be within 5 degrees either side to be counted as established on the final approach track. So we are now established on the final approach track. So we will report this to ATC. Base turn complete, established final approach track, runway 19. So now we're waiting for the descent profile. So as I mentioned before, the descent profile begins at 4.7. So at 0.5 nautical miles before that, we're going to reduce the power. So at 5.2 DME, I'm going to reduce the power to 30%. So there we go, 5.2 reducing to 30%. And this is going to decelerate us to 90 knots. Then at 4.8 DME, I'm going to set the takeoff flaps, and we're going to set the range of descent for our ground speed. So we've got an 8 knot headwind, so that's going to be about 82 knots, so about 400 feet per minute on the descent rate. So we're now established. So we now need to go on to our altitude checks, as this is not a 3D approach. So at 4 miles, 1580. That's 0.1 to go. 4 miles, 1580, 20 feet too high. So we're simply just going to adjust the altitude to get our descent rate, and I'm just bugging the missed approach altitude now. Next, 3 miles, 1260. Maintain, and we've increased that descent rate to get back on profile, and at the same time I've reduced the power. Approaching 3 miles now, 1260 is what we're looking for. Miles 1260 on profile. So we're now adjusting our attitude up to maintain that now. And you can see the the NDB needle slightly left of track, so we're coming to the left of the needle to push the head. And we want that head lined up with the CDI indicator. Okay, 2 miles 940. 1,000 feet, we are stable, continuing. Miles 940 checked. 100 above. Visual continuing. Minimums. Okay, so we're a little bit high now, it's now visual. And you'll notice the NDB is offset. This is normal, this isn't just my bad flying. With the NDB is normally offset from the actual approach path, so you will be slightly right or left of the airfield. So it's now a visual manoeuvre to line ourselves up. So we're getting the speed down, we've got our flaps, runway's clear, clearance received, gears fixed, flaps at landing, and approach is stable. And there we go. That is how you do a NDB approach. If you do have any questions about this procedure, please do put a comment under the video and I'll be sure to answer. Thanks everyone.